Welcome, friends. I'm so glad that you're with us today. Last week, we began our Bible scavenger hunt together, and hopefully you had a chance with your families to look at how you are God's workmanship, His masterpiece, His poem. We learned about God creating us in His image. And just like Adam and Eve, we are also made in His image, and we want to remember that this week. Today, we're moving on in our scavenger hunt to what happens next after Adam and Eve were created. And we are going to pick up tonight in the Old Testament. Remember, our Bible has two main parts to it, the Old Testament and the New Testament. And we're in the Old Testament tonight in the very first book, the book of Genesis. And remember, we have 39 books in our Old Testament. So let's review those together. Oh, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and the last one, Malachi. Very good. And friends, if you don't know those Old Testament books yet, we want you to learn those. We want you to learn the books of our Old Testament. So tonight we are in Genesis, and we are now in Genesis chapter 3. That is where we're picking up. And so if you've got Bibles like this at home, pull them out. If you've got another Bible at home, pull it out and see if you can find Genesis chapter 3 in your Bibles. Here's our lesson for tonight. So Adam and Eve lived happily together in their beautiful new home, and everything was perfect for a while. Until one day, everything went wrong. You see, God had a horrible enemy, and his name was Satan. Satan had been one of the most beautiful angels, but he didn't want to just be an angel. He wanted to be God. He grew too proud and full of hate, and God had to send him out of heaven. And Satan was angry, and he was looking for a way to hurt God. He wanted to stop God's plan. So he disguised himself. That means he dressed himself up as something else. And he dressed himself up as a snake in the garden. Now, God had given Adam and Eve one rule. Don't eat from that tree, God told them. Because if you do, then you'll know everything and you'll stop trusting me. And then death and sadness and tears will come. You see, God knew that if they ate the fruit, they would think that they didn't need him anymore, and they would try to make themselves happy without him. But God knew there was no such thing as happiness without him. God knew that they needed him. So the snake took his chance. He slithered up to Eve. Does God really love you? The serpent whispered. If he does, why doesn't he let you eat from that tree? God doesn't want you to be happy. The snake hissed these words into Eve's ears, and it began to sink down into her heart like poison. Does God love me? Eve wondered, and suddenly she didn't know anymore. Just trust me, the serpent said. You don't need God. One small little taste, that's it. And then you'll be happier than you could ever dream. And so Eve picked the fruit, and she ate some. And Adam ate some too. And a terrible, terrible lie came into the world, and it would never leave. It would live on in every human heart, whispering to every one of God's children, God doesn't love me. And it wasn't a dream. It was a nightmare. A dove flew from Adam's hand. A deer darted in a thicket. It was as if they were frightened by something. A chill was in the air. Something strange was happening. They had always been naked, but now that they knew it, and they felt wrong, and so they hid. And later that evening, as God was taking his walk, he called to them, "Children!" And usually Adam and Eve loved to hear God's voice and would run to him. But this time, they hid. "Where are you?" God called. "Hiding," said Adam. "We're afraid." Adam said, God asked him, "Did you eat from the fruit that I told you not to?" And Adam pointed to Eve and said, "Eve made me do it." God asked Eve, and she said, "The serpent made me do it." And a terrible pain came into God's heart. His children hadn't just broken a rule, they had broken God's heart. Their wonderful relationship with him, and now he knew everything else would break. God's creation would start to unravel and come undone and go wrong. From now on, everything would die, even though it was supposed to have lasted forever. You see, sin had come into God's perfect world, and it would never leave. God's children would always be running away and hiding. Their hearts would break and never work properly again. God couldn't let his children live forever, not in such pain without him. There was only one way to protect them. "You will have to leave the garden," God told his children, his eyes filling with tears. "This is no longer your true home. It's not the place for you anymore." But before they left the garden, God made clothes for his children, and he gently clothed them and sent them on their long, long journey out of the garden. Well, in another story, that would have been the end. But friends, I'm so thankful that's not the end of our story. Not in this story. God loved his children too much to let this story end here. And even though he knew he would suffer, God had a plan, a magnificent dream. One day, he would make the whole world perfect again. One day, he would wipe away every tear from every eye. You see, no matter what, in spite of everything, God would never stop loving his children. He had a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. And though they would forget him and run from him, deep in their hearts, God's children would always, always long for him. Lost children yearning for their home. Before they left the garden, God whispered a promise to them. "It will not always be so. I will come and I will rescue you. And when I do, I'm going to battle against the snake, and I'll get rid of sin and the dark and sadness, and I'm coming back for you." And he would. One day, God himself would come back. I love how that's not the end of the story. And throughout the next weeks, we are going to hunt more in these Bibles to find out what God's magnificent plan was. He had a plan, and we're going to learn what that plan was. So last week, I challenged you to learn the verse about how God created you. You are His masterpiece. You are His poem. Well, this week, our memory verse that I would love for all of us to learn says, you have been set free from the law of sin. And that's found in Romans 8:2. So like we learned in our lesson today, when Adam and Eve took the bite of that fruit, sin entered the world. And if this had been another story, that might have been the end, but it's not the end of the story. And even though all of us, myself included, I mess up, I make mistakes, but thank goodness that wasn't the end of the story. And there's more to our Bible, and God's plan included setting us free from that sin that entered the world. And so I want you to remember that today, friends. Remember that you are set free from sin. All right. I love it that you're here with us, and I can't wait to find our next stop on our journey through the Bible together. And I am praying for each one of you, and that you are enjoying studying the Bible together with your families. I will see you next time.